Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining us late in the day. Thanks for your enthusiasm. My name's Jane Madgwick. I'm the CEO of Wetlands International, and it's my pleasure just to give some opening remarks for this session. So I'm speaking on behalf of Wetlands International, the Global Environment Centre, FAO, the Greifswald-Meyer Centre, Ramsar Secretariat, International Fund for Agricultural Development, UNEP, and of course the Global Peatlands Initiative, who connects us all together. This is a joint side event on enhancing climate action through peatlands. So first of all, why? Why have we all come together around this side event? Why is because especially drainage in agriculture and forestry lands has turned our peatlands into a degraded state, which is really causing some catastrophes around the world. So fires, droughts, floods, even economic slowdown, health crises, loss of productive land. So this loss of peatlands is really a big issue, a relatively small percentage of the planet, but causing a massive issue. And of course, here in the Climate Summit, there's a lot of focus on the release of greenhouse gas emissions, which occurs on a massive scale, equivalent to 5% of the anthropogenic emissions every year. It's coming just from the drainage of peatlands around the world. So, how to address this problem? By protecting and restoring, especially re-wetting peatlands, it's possible to bring back the water storage capacity and avoid the greenhouse gas emissions, holding the carbon in the peat. This in turn helps to prevent the desertification of lands, to prevent water scarcity, loss of productivity, and the subsidence of land, sometimes leading to complete loss. Of course, it also is a crisis for biodiversity. So now there's an urgency to scale up the restoration of peatlands as well as to conserve that remains intact. So where are we on the pathway to achieving this? I think that's what this session is really about. So here we're going to hear from a variety of actors and countries about implementation. So what has been achieved and what has been the benefits of this work? What are the challenges that we have come across? And how is the collaboration going between different sectors? And how about the potential for replication of those results and upscaling? These are all the things I'm very curious to hear about. And coming here, I just reflected that Paris COP15, we launched a campaign, Save the Peat for Less Heat, together with all the conventions and Greifswald-Meyer Centre. And we proposed a roadmap to address the question of peatlands. So 11 COPs later, I'm very curious, how are we doing on this roadmap? So that's enough from me. I hope that you're as curious as I am to hear from all the speakers today. And I'll now hand you over to Diana Kopansky, who leads the Global Peatland Initiative for the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jane. And honestly, I also am really glad to have you here, to see you again after our blip of COVID, but also for the work that you've been doing and your team. It's really remarkable because this is definitely a journey, and it's really fabulous to be on this journey together. So everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Diana Kopansky, and I have the honor on behalf of the United Nations Environment Program to lead the Global Peatlands Initiative, which is generously supported by the International Climate Initiative of Germany. It's a network and a partnership of now 51 organizations strong, working to support directly for tropical peatland countries of Indonesia, Peru, Democratic Republic of Congo, and we have also the Republic of Congo. And it's a real pleasure to also have you here for this panel session today. We're all in the same boat of the climate and nature emergency. And peatlands are the hidden gem, really, the absolute tiny but mighty ecosystem that we need to urgently pay attention to meet our climate and our nature commitments, as well as supporting water, resilience, and health and well-being for all people. Today, I'm really happy to be your moderator through this first part of this journey. The event will showcase how countries have included, enhanced, or are implementing climate commitments, such as the NDCs, through peatlands. It will present their experiences either through process or through implementation, country examples of climate action through peatlands conservation, restoration, and sustainable management. And because climate action on peatlands is doable and affordable, we also know that we will have more and more interest through the private sector and other funding partners to come to the table. The session is indeed separated into two blocks. We'll have two panel discussions and a mix of presentations and discussions, so please get ready to ask your questions. We'll have, first of all, I'm honored to introduce Ms. SPM Budisusanti, the Director of Peatland Degradation and Control Unit from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia. She also has a new role to lead the International Tropical Peatlands Center, which is a new emerging and important center that we really want to see how to support through the network. So, Ibu Budisusanti, you have the floor. Yeah, thanks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here. My name is SPM Budisusanti, but just call me Ati to make it easier. As already mentioned by Ms. Diana Komensky, I'm the director for the peatland degradation control from Indonesia, and also currently appointed as the leader for the ITPC, International Tropical Peatlands Center. And we would like to present and sharing experience from Indonesia point of view in terms of protection and management of peatland ecosystem in Indonesia to address climate change. Indonesia has this is the position Indonesia in terms of peatland ecosystem as the first larger tropical peatland and having 24.667 billion hectares, and also the fourth largest in the world of the peatland ecosystem in Indonesia. And the benefit not only for the forestry, it's also for flood control, fire risk, and of course the climate stability. And this is the situation of our peatland spread from Sumatra, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and Papua, and consists of 865 PHU, and each PHU mostly utilized by several activities, not only for plantation but also for conservation area and also a community area. And this is the peatland, 90% of water, so we have to be careful to care of the water in the peatland. Without water, it is not peatland. So this is the problem, the main problem, the dryness, the poor dryness in the peatland will cause dry peat and also land subsidence that cause greenhouse gas emission reduction or flooding. And this is Indonesia commitment on protection and management from the high level. My president gave it the directive and instruction on the peatland restoration, and he keep in his watch, and has a watch to check continuously whether there is improvement, there is a big effort in following their direction with the 4 components: controlling and alleviating of the potential fire and law enforcement, and promoting for the fire prevention through the protection and management of peatland ecosystem, and burn area will control by the state government. And the second one, developing of the government regulation to give more power and authority to protect and manage the peatland ecosystem in Indonesia, and also developing the national plan for 30 years from 2019 to 2049. And it is a direction and also reference for the implementation of peatland protection and management in the provincial and district level. And this is for the international commitment, not only together with Peru and DRC, ROC, also supported by GBI. We launched the ITPC. We also together with countries in the UNEA for 2019 adopted the UNEA resolution on sustainable conservation and sustainable peatland management, and the G20 GECMM 2020. We have several paragraphs that agreed for peatland to move forward to get the global beneficiary. And this is the guideline that we already developed to give the direction for implementation in the field. And this is the updated National Determination Contribution NDC 2021 that we already put at peatland restoration in the NDC. We can see that under the BAU, business as usual, it is assumed no restoration activities under the CM1 and CM2 pit restoration will reach 2 million hectare by 2030. And Indonesia also put the peatland conservation and sustainable management as a part of Indonesia Volunetzing 2030. And it is in the one of the sector for achieving the NDC. Volunetzing is part of Indonesia's strategy to ensure the achievement of the goals of the Paris Agreement. The steps taken are to restrain the increase in the rate of the earth temperature to below 0.5 degrees Celsius. We contribute from the conservation and sustainable peatland management in 3 components. The first one is for the land cover, second one for the elimination of forest fire, and the third one for the water governance in the peatland. Increasing the water level in the peatland ecosystem will contribute to the reduction of emission in the peatland ecosystem for NDC and also Volunetzing. This is the implementation of peatland restoration. There are 3 components. The main point, rewetting, rehabilitation, and of course with allowing, improving community livelihood. And this is the result. We already achieved 3.600 billion hectares in the community area and almost 50,000 hectares, 3.680 is in the industrial forest and also in the palm oil plantation for the concession holders, and almost 50,000 hectares in the community area. And this is, we already developed from that area a monitoring point for water level to get the data real time for the improvement of water level in the peatland ecosystem, that intervention by restoration with the water governance. And this is the updating status after conducting the restoration on the vegetation, and also with the community improvement on community livelihood improvement with implementing Paludiculture. We also plan the 3 sessions of planting. The first, the short session, to get the economic in the short term. For example, planting chili, cabbage with the short term can produce and sell by the community, and in the medium term we also planting pineapple and so forth, and for long term we planting for the timber plantation. This is the monitoring data that we get not only for the concession holders but also developed by BRGM. The data goes to the system, what we call CPEC, Information System for Peatland Protection and Management in Indonesia, and soon it will be available for publish. And this is in the community area, how they implement the water level measurement and easy and modest mode that easier for community to involve in the monitoring of water level. And this is the result from the previous, the baseline we get from the inventory before the intervention implemented. And then the second one in the right is after we conduct the restoration, there is an improvement in the water level that it will be a modality of our to claim the reduction of emission of greenhouse gas emission reduction in terms of improvement of water level in the peatland ecosystem. And this is the system that I already mentioned before. We can see from the data, sorry for bringing the 7th November because the presentation have to be delivered to the organizers soon. So we can see that the yellow and green color, it is the bi-weekly TMAT monitoring data. The green means that less than 0.4 meter, and the yellow is between 0.4 until 0.8 meter below surface. And no hot spot detected. And this is our proposal to calculate the emission contribution on the greenhouse gas emission reduction for water level management. And this is the calculation that we achieve with the methodology that we use. We already achieved this 267.0906 from the concession holders and 3.362 from the community area. And yet we have to struggle with the methodology to be confirmed to get the recognition of the achievement. Thank you very much.
Wow, I am just trying to absorb the amount of work that Indonesia has put into trying to recover their climate emergency from peatlands degradation. So congratulations. I know you're so dedicated, and the entire country as well. It's not something that every country has the capacity or the funds to deliver. And I just know that not only is your government committed, but also in order to support your people for access to healthcare, the peatlands restoration and rewetting is really important, because of course the challenges that you're facing are enormous, both because of climate change but also the peat fires. So congratulations. I do appreciate that you share all your depth of knowledge. It's really truly impressive. I'm going to now pass to Jean-Jacques Bambuta. Welcome, Jean-Jacques. Jean-Jacques Bambuta is one of a very unique person because very few countries in the world have a peatlands unit. And Jean-Jacques Bambuta is the head of the peatlands unit in the Democratic Republic of Congo and works for the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. Jean-Jacques, can I help you? Okay, so maybe it's back this way. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. You're going to get a preview. Yeah, where we go. Right there? Yes?
Yes, here I am.
There we go. Welcome.
Okay, hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bambuta Jean-Jacques from Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm working for the Ministry of Environment and I'm in charge of peatland in DRC. I was asked to share some information in order to explain to you how peatland was included in the national contribution. First of all, I would like to share with you some information on the DRC's context in the climate change. Now, since the last COP in Glasgow, DRC is presenting himself even now that DRC is the solution country to the climate change. Why? This is for 4 reasons. The first one is in DRC we have 10% of planet tropical forest. At this moment we have a tower flags that we can find in the Yangambi area. Information that are coming to these tower flags are saying that DRC's forest is storing more carbon than the forest from Brazil. It means that the lungs of the world is no longer in Brazil, but you have to find it in DRC. Now, the second reason is in DRC we have several resource minerals that are useful to the transition ecology. At this moment we are talking about electric car, but in DRC we can find all those materials that can help, for example, when we like to make a new battery. The third reason is DRC, we have 52 of Africa freshwater. Maybe in the coming years, the next war will not be on the diamond, on mineral, but in water. Because at this moment, some people are going, for example, from the country like Chad, and they are looking for water. So water will become one of the important elements in next year. But one of the last element that is showing that DRC is one of the solutions to the climate change is peatland. I'm happy because we have Simon Lewis in this room. Hi Simon, how are you? Okay. Apart from the peatland that we have discovered in the central basin, we may have also other peatland in mangrove, in Katanga, and in the Valley Rift. It means that because of the importance of this peatland, this is also raising the contribution of DRC to the climate change. This means also when we have all this natural capital, like what DRC have, it means that DRC has to become also more responsible, and DRC have also to make the strong policy in order to manage all those ecosystems. Now let's come back to the NDC. DRC has identified his own vision on the climate change, which is to promote a green economy. It means that when we are making agriculture, we are looking also forward how this agriculture can become more sustainable. And the actual version that of NDC that the DRC has submitted is taking into account the last information of the last version, and also some information from the National Communication on the Climate Change, and also some sectoral policy like RED Plus policy, like also the policy of adaptation. And according to the sector that we can find in the DRC's NDC, when we are reading the last version, we will not find peatland. But now we have included peatland and west. Why we have included peatland? It is just because of the important contribution of this ecosystem in the kind of the attenuation of the climate. And also at this moment, what DRC is looking to do is, sure, we have some information on where we can find peatland, but there is also important to make a kind of knowledge development, because at this moment we are talking about peatland, but there are also some areas in which some studies are needed, like hydrology, like how people are living, like also treat, like also the biology and studies of soil. One of the important elements that DRC would like to do at this moment is the identification of peatland policy, because if you want to include it in the NDC, we have also to share, for example, how many stock of carbon that we can find, not only in the central basin, but also to the other areas. It means that we have to continue with studies. But the most important thing is what I was saying during my first presentation. If we want to conserve peatland, we have also to show to all those people, not only all the people, we have also to share even to those who are making a decision, what is the importance of peatland. It means that politicians are only sometimes understanding only the economical language. We have to show what is the exact value of peatland. When everybody know what is the exact value of peatland, so we can make a policy in count of conservation. I think at this level, those are some information that I can share, and I'm ready for the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jean-Jacques. And Jean-Jacques, you missed one thing. Your fabulous outfit is made from people from the Cuvette Centrale Peatlands. Is this correct? It's beautiful. This is highly sought after in Nairobi. I live in Nairobi, and I was just comparing prices. Jean-Jacques, you got a better price, but you look fabulous in your outfit. Thank you so much. And so we can see how different, how different countries are in this journey on a climate emergency and also the nature opportunity. I'd love to, now we're going to go into the panel discussion and introduce our final speaker, who is Manuel Garcia Rosal, a mitigation specialist from the Ministry of Environment in Peru. And I'll start with you, Manuel, if you don't mind. I'd like to ask you the question about Peru's journey that you're I'm counting the days to see it released, but I'd love to learn a little bit about your journey on how Peru has included peatlands in the NDC, and what progress is also existing as far as the legal framework for Peru's NDC implementation. It's definitely a challenge, and we heard from Jean-Jacques their process, but please, Manuel, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you also for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here to have this opportunity to share the experience of the Peruvian government in the implementation of NDC and the possibility to engage with peatlands management also in the frame of the NDCs. So first of all, I would like to mention that Peru also has peatlands in the country. We have around 75,000 square kilometers. In recent years, Peru has made efforts to strengthen the awareness of the importance of peatlands and important to have policies to improve its management, such as, for example, the General Regulation for Peatlands Management enacted this year, which promote peatland conservation and establish prohibition to peat extraction for commercial purposes, and find to have engagement of different actors and authorities to promote this peatlands management. But also, at the same time, we are working right now in the design of specific mitigation measures under the frame of our NDC. And for that, I would like to give a general frame about the experience of Peru in the legal framework and institutional framework. So probably Peru was one of the first countries to submit its NDC in 2015 when we submit our INDC. For that moment, Peru doesn't have a climate change law, and institutional framework was not completed, I can say. So we had to establish some temporary multi-sectoral working groups in order to plan how to implement the NDC commitment and how to establish a roadmap for the NDC implementation. So in this process, we had positive results. For example, we identified 62 mitigation measures and around 64, I don't remember exactly, I think 82 adaptation measures. And we established some kind of guidelines for the design of measures under the NDC. We call this tentative program, something like roadmaps. In Spanish, it's programación tentativa. I think in English it's not exactly the same. But this is a document that establishes the provisions for the implementation, including schedules and identification of enabling conditions. So the mode of work is to give the competences to the sectoral authorities to design its own measures under its own competences. For example, the Ministry of Energy and Mines, Ministry of Agriculture, etc., etc. We try to engage what they already has working for sectoral purposes. In the year 2018, our climate change law was enacted, and that was a very positive step because we established finally the roles and responsibilities of national authorities like ministries and regional governments, and also we established multi-sectoral permanent spaces like the one of these is the high-level commission high-level commission on climate change, which is a space composed by high-level authorities such as ministers and deputy ministers, which has the role to identify and to establish the NDCs. So we have this space in order to have, for example, the update of the subsequent NDCs. So just to give directly to the point, I think this experience to have a legal framework and an institutional framework give us the possibility to engage and to give guidelines to the different stakeholders to design and to include different measures in the frame of our NDC. So we have an NDC very ambitious. We have a target around 40% of emission reductions in the, against the business and social scenario by year 2030. But how we can achieve this target? So we need to design mitigation measures. This implies work with all actors, public sector, regional authorities, civil society, indigenous people, etc., etc. So this framework gives us opportunity to, for example, design a specific mitigation measure related to peatlands. So in this moment, the Ministry of Environment, through the Directorate of Biodiversity, is currently working along with the Amazon Research Institute, Peruvian Amazon Research Institute, in the design of mitigation measure related to peatlands. So this is the first step that we are conducting currently to introduce these works that they already has been made during the recent years, but now under the frame of NDC. So this would support the roadmap of the country to achieve our NDC, and of course, we need to increase progressively our climate ambition for the next periods of our NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manuel. You can see the diversity and the different experiences across the countries, across the tropical countries, all in different stages, but I think that the most important thing is that we're sharing this progress and the steps, because it's complicated. And one of the steps that's needed, of course, is to understand, just how peatlands are changing, and also just to know where they are. So the Global Peatlands Initiative will be also launching the Global Peatlands Assessment on the 17th. Hope that you do join us there. I think that that's a vital component in being able to address any measure. We need to know exactly where they are. I'm going to now ask Jane a little question here because of your experience. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how civil society, how do you see the role of civil society organizations supporting countries to enhance the NDC ambition, and not only the ambition and inclusion, but in a situation like Indonesia, how would they support the implementation as well? Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. I would say that the involvement and the leadership of civil society is pretty much essential in every peatland conservation and restoration program wherever you are in the world. So not only in Indonesia, but also, say, in Scotland, whatever. Because in the end, it's those local communities who are living there, and they need to, their care for their landscape needs to be respected, and the conservation and restoration of peatlands needs to mean something to their livelihoods and their economy. So I think in Indonesia this has worked pretty well, that the work with local communities has gone hand in hand with government interventions, and very often, for example, Wetlands International will engage with communities for a few years, build their capacity and understanding, start to enable some alternative livelihoods, and help create a vision for the restoration programme. And then there's a readiness for the injection of larger scale measures. So I think this is a way of working which has worked well in Indonesia, and we're using that in other parts of the world as well.
Thanks so much, Jane. I'm going to ask you, Ibu Budisusanti, a question. How did Indonesia realize the need to include peatlands in your NDC, and what you explained already your goals and targets, but I just want to see the sheer scale of the work that you have ahead of you.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, of course, being realized, being honest with you that in 2015 we have a disaster for forest fire that some of them come from peatland, and then we realized that we have to work really hard to reduce the potential forest fire, because the forest fire will what we call mix the community suffer, but also the haze will go to other place, to other neighbor, to Malaysia, to Singapore, and so forth, and suffering a lot of. And then a lot of activity sometimes have to be, for example, the flight that have to be delayed for this cause. And from this lesson learned, we start to work really hard. And then in several years, after 2 years, we conduct the work hard for the peatland conservation and sustainable management. The potential forest fire reduce, and now we can see for my presentation for the at least for 2022. 2022, indeed, a lot of intervention area. I mean, in most all of the intervention area for peatland conservation and sustainable management free from the fire, and not only for the lesson learned from this situation, we also get some benefit in the economic, and the community can able to work well without haze and without suffering from the fire. And we realize after the reduction of the degree of forest fire from peatland, and we conduct revegetation to have what we call to restore peatland from in the burn area. We realize that it can be calculated in the contribution of our NDC. And the last that we still struggle is on the improvement of water governance, that we realize, because why we have to struggle, because we realize there is no guidance in the IPCC for water level, for greenhouse gas emission reduction from groundwater water governance in the peatland area, and we have to struggle the methodology that we propose. And our methodology, our proposed methodology, we realize that water governance indeed a big opportunity to contribute to the Indonesia NDC and also Indonesia Volunteering. So, yeah, but we consider to other country not having doing something after having a bad experience, but starting from now, let's work us together to contribute to the climate change for the peatland conservation and sustainable management without bad experience. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Certainly, many countries have benefited from your open, honest, and real account of your experience on peatlands. And I understand we're running a little bit late. So I think if there's, do you want to have one last impression, or would we pass to the next panel? Everyone's good to pass to the next panel? I'll invite my colleague here, Yerker Tamalander from the Convention on Wetlands to take the next panel. And thank you so much for sharing. Let's join the audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you to panelists for excellent input. My name is Jerker Tamelandra. I'm the Director of Science and Policy at the Secretariat of the Convention on Wetlands. I'm sorry, I get a lot of feedback at the moment. In this second block of this side event, we're turning towards plans and turning plans into action. So after hearing these examples of peatland-related commitments, from integration into implementation from countries that are really at the forefront of taking peatlands action, countries that have some of the largest expanses of peatlands in the world, we'll now look a little bit more on the planning process, some of the essential ingredients for successful delivery, and some of the essential ingredients for successively higher ambition. And so with this, I'd like to invite the panelists up to the podium. Amy Duchelle is the Senior Forestry Officer and Team Leader on Forests and Climate at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. We have Hanna Kekkonen, a researcher at the Natural Resources Institute of Finland. Dr. Wong Sok, the head of the Environment Division at the Secretariat of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that's ASEAN. And then Shaq Koyok, a Temuan artist and Indigenous peoples representative from Malaysia. So with Shaq on the podium, we're ready to go. First of all, thank you so much for being here. Without any further ado, I would like to invite you, Amy, to give us the first presentation for this session. Please go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jerker and colleagues, for organizing this session and inviting FAO to participate. Nope. If we could bring up the presentation.
Can we have some tech support, please? We need to see the slides. Can you please bring the presentation on screen? Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Fantastic. So today I'm presenting the results of joint work of many partners on embedding peatlands in climate action, from enhanced nationally determined contributions to implementation. And I would like to thank the FAO colleagues responsible for this work who are watching online, including Maria Nuutinen, who leads FAO's peatlands work. So I think we all know how we really can't solve the climate crisis without the world's peatlands. Not only with the world's peatlands, but we certainly can't leave them out of the equation. We've already heard that peatlands are only 3% of the global land area, but that they contain a huge carbon stock in their peat soil that's really, twice as much as all of the trees on the planet. So critical piece of the puzzle. And 15% of the world's peatlands are already drained, and between 5 and 10% are degraded and emitting 5% of the total greenhouse gas emissions currently. And some of the numbers will be refined in the Global Peatlands Assessment that Diana mentioned, which will be released in a couple of days. So we also know that losing peatlands threatens ecosystem services and adaptive capacity, and here you really see this kind of vicious cycle of increased fire frequency, land degradation, increased carbon loss for your water, and biodiversity loss, and how the drainage of peatlands and the continued emissions really just augment that cycle over time. And so this is an interesting analysis by FAO and the Greifswald-Meyer Center, really showing the occurrence of wetlands in peatland and climate commitments, and the cutoff date for this analysis, I should say, was September of this year. And so there have been NDC submissions since then, and basically what's shown here is that the orange is where peatlands are mentioned in the NDCs. In blue, it's where they're not mentioned, and then the gray is where it's not applicable. But again, the caveat that just because a country isn't orange here doesn't mean that it's not undergoing climate action that focuses on peatlands, like we heard from the Peru case, and it also may be forthcoming in NDC submissions. So Diana really nicely introduced the Global Peatlands Initiative, and FAO is very happy to be a partner on that. And one of the areas that we're working on is supporting the inclusion of peatlands into NDCs, prior and during NDC enhancement processes, but also, other national policies, strategies, maps, and monitoring efforts, as well as providing practical and resources for countries' planning and implementation. Also a call for the closer collaboration with the focal points from the Ramsar Convention, Yarker, and it was, the team was at the COP14 last week really talking to the wetlands specialist about the importance of connecting to the climate community, and we're here this week talking about the importance of the climate community reaching out to the wetlands specialist to really make this work together. So we have the launch. It's finally online as of today. I'll share the link at the end of the presentation. But the launch of a new guiding report about peatlands in climate planning, and it includes, very key elements and very practical steps that countries can consider to enhance climate action from peatlands and to mobilize finance. This involved 35 contributors and 11 organizations involved. And based on broad expert consultation over the last year, something like 210 participants representing 163 organizations from 89 countries. So really quite an effort. And this will also be followed by a webinar with Wetlands International on the findings. So a few of the sort of components for sustainable peatlands management that are highlighted in this report are really, maintaining, highlighting these sort of essential elements, maintaining water levels at or near the surface for most of the year, maintaining the integrity of the peat body, and the wetland plant species that form the peat, and really focusing on the priority strategies of immediate conservation and protection of intact peatlands, and restoration and re-wetting of peatlands as rapidly as possible. And then also, though, understanding that if countries aren't totally ready for these steps immediately, some adaptive management to decrease the intensity of activities on peatlands, but that really should be transitioning into restoration very soon. Also really focused on the monitoring aspect, and this, FAO's really sort of bread and butter is national forest monitoring, and peatland monitoring is included in that, and really trying to understand and support how countries can monitor change in peatlands, and doing this in support of the enhanced transparency framework to help justify investments and mobilize climate finance, support adaptive management, and provide early warning and taking early action, especially when we're thinking about disaster risk reduction and that sort of vicious cycle that I was showing earlier, that monitoring is absolutely critical and important for that. So some of the take-home messages, we know, we cannot achieve the Paris Agreement goals without action on peatlands. Not only on peatlands, we need to do a lot more than that, but they need to be included. There's still minimal inclusion of peatlands in NDCs, although we've heard some wonderful examples today. And that, really looking for those key finance options and tools to leverage finance and support for peatland conservation, protection, and restoration, and that their wealth of experience is available, and a lot of that is highlighted in the report below. So please, you can, this link, you can jot it down. You can also contact us at this link, peatlands@fao.org, and we can share the report with you that is online as of today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amy, for that presentation. And I think we have to recognize this is a very important guide on peatlands and climate planning that was launched here. It's very important synthesis on the status of peatlands and other wetlands in NDCs that you launched last week at the 14th COP of the Convention on Wetlands. And I really want to acknowledge that it provides direction, it provides status assessment, it provides tools that directly respond to resolutions adopted by the Convention on Wetlands. And so explicitly calling for inclusion of peatlands action in NDCs and for leveraging synergies across MEA frameworks. So thank you very much for that. Since we are slightly behind schedule, we won't take any questions now. We'll try to do that later. And with that, Hanna Kekkonen, I invite you to the podium. Please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, my name is Hanna Kekkonen and I'm Luke Natural Resource Institute of Finland. And I'm here to tell you about examples of implementing climate-friendly cultivation methods of agricultural peat soils such as Paludiculture in Finland. Next two first slides will be just background to set the importance of re-wetting practices in context, as we have heard already today. So we already know that about 1/10 of our agricultural soils are organic soils in Finland, and they locate mostly in northern parts of Finland, and their total climate effect is about 8 million tons of carbon dioxide every year. We also know that most efficient way to reduce those emissions is raising the water table, as you have heard and you can see from this picture, the current emission factors for different kind of agricultural land use, but also an estimate of Paludiculture's emissions based on our latest review. We also know that as emissions from peat soils are the key source of agricultural greenhouse gases in our country, we will not get to our carbon neutrality targets without re-wetting some of existing peat-based fields. So, in Finland, we have going a governmental Catch the Carbon funding program, and this program is funding also a project where we have started piloting the implementation of Paludiculture in Finland. In this project, we are piloting suitable plants to grow in our climatic area, piloting re-wetting methods for different sites, as every field has different hydrological conditions and layer of peat and drainage system. We are piloting new value chains for new biomasses, where we also try to involve companies who can use paludiculturally produced biomasses, piloting new cultivation methods like harvesting, but also verify the environmental and socio-economical impacts of re-wetting. In big picture, we try to find out if Paludiculture could become a new way to have income and emission reductions at the same time. So in this picture, you can see a visualization of one existing value chain which we have achieved in this project. There's a farmer who produces reed canary grass for company, who composts it to growing media and sells it further. And you can see the farmer's review behind this QR code. We also are working with other biomasses, and down here are some of samples of suitable plants and suitable uses for them. As a result of the project, we will have better understanding how paludiculture could technically be implemented, but also calculations about economics for farmers. For now, we know that we need working markets, but also support farmers with different kind of funding instruments so that farmers are encouraged to make the necessary transition from conventional farming to paludiculture. With this project, we want to show for others that be curious, try something new. At start, neither we did know much. We don't know if paludiculture will come as a common cultivation practice in Finland or not. But I keep telling myself that once someone came to Finland bringing the first sack of potatoes by aiming, this is what we should eat now. So we all have here today what we have to do, so let's just do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hanna, for a very concrete example on sectoral collaboration in Finland. At this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Wong Sok on the topic of financing solutions from the ASEAN region. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. ASEAN Secretariat have a great pleasure to present to you all today about the plan to action. I think all of you have well known an interest in peatland. Peatland must be quite important to all of you. But ASEAN region is quite uniqueness that peatland is not only for the peat soil itself, but as highlighted by Ibu Santi early, it's about transboundary haze. So ASEAN region is a unique region that brings us together on this ASEAN agreement on transboundary haze. This is one of the key documents to guide our action. With that, we have a number of plans. That the way Jenka just mentioned that we have a number of plans. We have the roadmap, the ASEAN agreement on transboundary haze-free roadmap, and also we have ASEAN peatland management strategy and so on. All of these key documents to guide our action. And also with that, today, in order to make that more really impact, we want to present to you about the financing solution that we try to bring all that key players, including the community, who really, in the core of the business for their daily livelihood as well. So this, I'm not really going into detail. As you can see, 90% of the transboundary smoke haze in Southeast Asia, it's Southern Asian, it's from the peatland, while the fire from northern part of the ASEAN, it's from the slash and burn and agriculture practice. I think this because of we still rely on the primary sector, quite important. And of course, the forest fire or smoke haze happened because of the seasonal dry season happened in the northern part and southern part of the sub-region. I mean, the northern part, which is we said about the Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, and so on, while the southern part is Indonesia and so on. So as you can see here, the seasonal differences in the smoke haze situation in Southeast Asia. So this is the impact. I would not go to detail all that impact. I mean, that's significant impact. As you can see, the impact to the land itself, to the people, and also to the carbon sort of issue, emission and sequestration, and also premature death in relation to different sort of respiratory disease, and of course, economic impact from the tourists and also the transportation and so on and so forth, and the tourist sector. So with that, ASEAN have working with partner and with the ASEAN member state to develop this 10-year investment framework, aiming to provide the platform to build partnership and help generate resources for priority need and opportunity for peatland forest land and haze management, as well as build investment portfolio for haze-free ASEAN for up 2030. So this is the way we try to put our plan to practice, to guide our resource mobilization and so on. This will involve a range of stakeholders in ASEAN, including the government agency, development assistance agency, education, research institution, and the CSO, NGO, and so on. So all this really provide initial target with the 1.5 billion to be leveraged to support ASEAN peatland management strategy and the roadmap till 2030. Right now, the two documents is under the review, and the ASEAN peatland management strategy and roadmap. It complete the review, and now it's in the process of formulation new strategy for the APMS as well as the roadmap. So this work together as a three document, the plan, drive to the action. So that may scale up the stepwise for the mechanism. So this is the guiding document that I talked earlier. Starting from the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025, and also the ASEAN Haze-Free Roadmap and the ASEAN Peatland Management Strategy, among other. So this, I think with that I don't want to elaborate, yes, because this is the key issue that contribute to a number of international commitment, SDG and so on, as similar other speakers have already highlighted, so I will not go into detail. That's for sure. The peatland is contribute to the international commitment and also to the ASEAN Agreement on Transboundary Haze. So this is about the way how the commitment, what are the commitment of the our ASEAN member state with the NDC. I just would like to flash because in the interest of time. So some countries go to 20% of the GHG emissions, some countries go to 41%, or up to the 60%, or 75% as well. So the minimum at least 20% because of the economic scale and so on. So just for your reference. So what about investment haze-free in ASEAN region? It's deliver on UN SDG. This is the way we try to transform agricultural waste to green product and so on and so forth. So I just want you to know this sort of important contribution to the SDG. And with that, I think this is the way we guide to the success. Propose initial transformational strategy. The strategy one, strengthen regional, national, local capacity for fire prevention, prediction, monitoring, and control and recovery. So this is the way we try to address the transboundary haze issue. So I will not read all that detail. You can read that also on the strategic aid about scaling up sustainable financing option for haze-free region. That is one of the things that to provide this platform. And you can see this timeline proposed. We have a next step process is very clear about the roundtable discussion that with all the potential partner and donor funding agency, or that we can have also bilateral or focal group discussion, multilateral. And also we have the way we discuss and work with the ASEAN member state, with the different sort of institutions to discuss about what is the key investment, who should be involved as part of resource mobilization strategy and investment. And then with that, we also hope that to establish a partnership and regional multi-stakeholder platform where we can keep them informed and also engage to mobilize resource, but also to contribute where it's possible, and strengthen the linkages with the implementation of the NDC under this Paris Agreement. And if you need to have more information, this is the reference that from the Measurable Sustainable Land Management in Southeast Asia under the support of MASA. And Global Environmental Center, GEC, it's one of our key players in this matter. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wongsok, for this example, which is, it's a very interesting example in how it connects climate change and air quality issues, human health as a driver behind the regional transboundary agreement, and at the same time providing the framework through which very ambitious climate action and also biodiversity action can be taken. So hopefully we can come back to you on that a little bit later. It's a great pleasure to invite Shaq Koyok to give the last brief presentation in this session, and before we go into a bit of discussion. And Shaq, thank you again for offering an indigenous people's perspective, which is absolutely crucial in this context.
Thank you so much for introducing me, and good evening. And my name is Shaq Koyok. I'm an indigenous Tamuan people from Malaysia, and here I'd like to show a little bit of indigenous role in action of indigenous people in protection of peatland. This is the indigenous people in Malaysia, and work together with the GAC. Peatland has formed, of course, has formed for 1,000 years. I think it's silly to have to. I heard so many idea people that want to create a peatland. I think this is not really peatland. Peatland takes about 1,000 years to form. You cannot create a peatland. It's just not like a normal forest. And of course, we know how important the peatland. I'm not going to repeat that again in my slide, but you can read it in my slide. But here, this is the picture in my land. This is the picture in Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve. This is the land of my territory. This is the land of the Tuman people. So many of my ancestors was buried here in this land, and I'm so proud of it because the one I'm wearing now is the clothes from the forest. It was made by my chief from my village, and I'm so proud to wear it for this COP27. And of course, global stewardship peatland by indigenous community, or as people know about IPLCAs, have been steward of the land for thousands of years. Our activity, the active engagement in preventing and reversing forest and peatland degradation is very essential. The report on state of indigenous people and the local community land and territory confirm that IPLCs are vital custodians of the world remaining natural landscapes. About 91% of IP land globally are in good or moderate ecological condition. IPLC are steward of some of the most important peatland thrown globally. Indigenous people culture and knowledge conservation are very important as well because we live on the land. And this is a picture of my relative, my nephew in the purple, and I hope people were inspired by our works and in protecting the forest, and at the same time we live our culture. And this is the peatland is not just for environment, but it's for the living being as well, for the people who live in the forest. And sadly, our government tried to deforested area in order to make a development project, and this is very alarming for us, for indigenous people, also for the health of our world. And we managed to stop it. This is one of a success story that we done in Malaysia together with the Global Environment Center and the community and the forest. So we managed to stop the government to destroy this forest, and to save this peat forest left in Malaysia. Malaysia, especially in Selangor state, we have very less area where the peatland still in very good condition, and we indigenous people tried best we can to protect it. And this is the part of my work as well as artist. I try to use the material from the forest as a message to tell the people how important the peat forest for indigenous people. That's true. At the same time, I can send the message how crucial the peat forest for world health and our environment, for example. And this is one of painting that show how peat forests been destroyed because of palm oil plantation, and this has happened throughout in Asia. This is I'm not gonna sugarcoating and everything. This has happened around Malaysia as well as Indonesia, or in Asia basically. So we need to stop that. Thank you so much, and you can read the rest of the text here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shaq, and also very interesting work that's being done, locally led, activism, information sharing, community support, partnership building, which, there's a need for attention to this topic, because as we have started to finally come to realize, Indigenous land under Indigenous stewardship often is in much, much better shape and provides the full range of services to the climate, to biodiversity, and to people. So thank you for those words. We do have a little bit of time for discussion, and I'd like to offer the opportunity for people in the room to perhaps ask questions if you have any. So those of you who may have a burning question, yes, I see a hand, and I will take that question straight away. Please go ahead. Please introduce yourself, and perhaps also, if there's a specific panelist, you direct your question to.
Oh, it's working? Oh, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Christiana. I work for Climate Catalyst. Thank you so much. This was a great panel. I have a question for Hannah, because I've been looking into Finland as well. Obviously, a lot of peatlands in Finland are drained because of forestry. And I love the work that you're doing on Paludiculture. I was wondering whether you have any examples of bringing the forestry industry on board to shift and transition to new business models, because unfortunately we've been seeing, as you know, the forestry industry opposing some legislations in Europe on a nature restoration law, for example. So do you have any positive examples or any plans to engage with the forestry industry on this?
Thank you. I'm sorry to say that I'm not an expert about forestry things, so I'm working with agricultural soils only. But I think that, yes, we have experts working also in Luke who are involved on projects with and cooperating with industries in Finland. But I'm sorry to say that I can't answer perfectly to you.
If I may, are there lessons from your work with the agriculture sector that are particularly relevant to share in this context that may be sort of more broadly applicable? And perhaps that's a question I can put to the whole panel. We're talking about a multitude of sectors that have different kinds of impacts on peatlands or draw different benefits from them. What have your experiences been that are particularly relevant? What's those critical points to bear in mind? Your work on agriculture was very interesting, I thought, so maybe you can share a few points about that. So whether you can reflect on experiences from your work with the agricultural sector that perhaps speaks to the point raised. What are those success factors?
So mean that if we have companies also in agricultural sector that who have been involved? Yes. Some of the not many of big companies have been interested about Paludiculture yet, but some of them have seen the importance of re-wetting also, because for example, milk footprint, there are really big milk industries in Finland, and they of course are calculating the footprints of their products, and they can already see that the footprint coming from soil use, and especially cultivation on peat soils, actually raises the footprint of their products so much that of course they want to encourage those farmers to do some climate friendly acts on the peat soils, and re-wetting, of course, or raising at least the water table could reduce also like the footprint of produced milk liter or produced meat kilo. So, for example, that is happening in Finland.
Thank you. Again, I look to the floor. There are no more immediate questions, at least, so I can maybe go to one here. And perhaps, Dr. Wongsuk, can I come back to you just briefly because of this example, which is very interesting. It's regional in nature, for one thing. In laying the foundation for this work, you have the transboundary agreement, but there must be an enormous planning element to moving this forward. And I think if you can reflect even further on how you create the really enabling conditions for finance, the investment that's required, whether it's from public resources or from other private funds. So are there further thoughts you can share? Because I think that might be relevant to other regions, other countries as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's my slide already presents something, but I mean it's not been enough time to elaborate in detail. I think it's I think there are two sort of important elements that you may need to consider. One thing, I think it's from the policy sort of backup. That's the most important in ASEAN, which is ASEAN Agreement on Transboundary Haze, but also the key guidance document on the roadmap itself, as well as the ASEAN Peatland Management Strategy. So all those things identify the key priority need of the region, including financial aspect. And those financial aspects is not really about to manage the peatland itself, but also share those sort of resources with the key player in the peatland, particularly the community, also the private sector as well. So that is the key sort of backup legal sort of reference. Second important element I would like to highlight, it's about the process. ASEAN is really mindful with the process. We would like to have this proper consultation process, meaningful engagement. So with that, the way we try to identify and prioritize, it's not to benefit only one side of the coin, but all the people, part of all inclusive in that aspect. So that's the way we also mindful different sort of vulnerable group from that community as well. And with that, I think the private sector, small scale farmer also share part of that solution as well. So these the two key characteristics of the process of investment framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. We are running very low on time, but I do want to come back to you with one question, Shaq. You spoke about your work. We've heard about working across industry sectors and so on. Many of these sectors, of course, are the ones driving change in the land. So what mechanisms are available, what mechanisms of support are in place for communities to really engage in an active way and contribute to carbon management, if you wish, or to help shape it?
Thank you for the question. Yes, Malaysia, we have a trouble of engage. I think Malaysia government have a trouble in engaging with the indigenous people. I think we need to address that problem, because without the engagement with the community, or those who live in a peatland, then we have the real problem of protecting the forest. And of course, we know the fact that many agencies, many corporate parties are really looking to the land for them to make up money. But in Malaysia, the protection of the peatland, the protection of indigenous people is become very hard for community who really in small minority. We don't have the proper right that really protect the land of our territory, and that's become a real problem here. And we basically have to use many support from many agencies, especially from non-government organization and also public. And I have to go to many places to promote and try to fight for our right, try to save the forest, basically on my own. And I received so many threats and so many, from this company, and try to silence my voice, silent for indigenous voice. And I find that quite hard to talk about it.
Thank you, Shaq. And now we really are low on time. Amy, any last thoughts having heard all of this?
I think, thanks. I think just one thing that I've been thinking about during this discussion is thinking about the importance of the entry point as adaptation and resilience when thinking about peatlands management, and sort of the unrecognized tool often of the national adaptation plans, which indeed bring in a lot of these cross-sectoral elements and engaging, including sort of the water sector, the forestry sector, the agriculture sector, as well as a lot of local engagement in terms of thinking about locally led adaptation options. So thinking of this as an entry point for promoting climate action on peatlands as well. Thanks.
Wonderful place to end the panel discussion. A very important reminder. Also a reminder that the NDCs may incorporate both mitigation and adaptation actions as well. And this is indeed what peatlands and other wetlands offer us, the multiple benefits. So on that, I hope you have drawn a lot of good examples from this discussion in terms of planning, how it needs to be founded in real data, how it needs to be built on working across sectors, really co-owned and co-created with stakeholders. And of course, how good planning and a conducive policy climate or a policy framework is the basis for financing that is absolutely critical for action. So with that, it is all from us here. Thank you so much to the panelists, and I would like to invite now Faizal Parish, Director of the Global Environment Center, to give the closing remarks in this side event. Faizal, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. So I have a little task to summarize an hour and a half of discussion and give some key points for us to take away from this room to our work in the future. So we've heard 7 different presentations spanning all across the world, from Indonesia with 24 million hectares of peatlands, where a lot of challenges and problems came with the fires, and the Indonesian government rose to the challenge and have developed one of the world's largest, most successful peatland rewetting and rehabilitation program. More needs to be done. From DRC, which has 10% of the world's tropical forests, and 11 million hectares of peatlands, where fortunately the peatlands are in better condition, and the country is really looking how to conserve those, and that's a good model for those who have intact the peatlands. And then we heard from Peru, which is trying to integrate peatlands into its key plans. So we've heard on this panel, I won't summarize all of the things from the panel, but there's new information, there's new guidance from FAO, there's new experience in Finland on Paludiculture, an example that really works. In the ASEAN region, the governments are working together, 10 countries across the region, to mobilize resources, mobilize stakeholders, work together. And last but not least, we heard from Shaq Koyok the importance of indigenous people. In fact, the latest publication that came out earlier this year have shown that there are more peatlands protected in indigenous lands than all of the nationally formal protected area of the world combined. There's about 50% more peatlands protected in those indigenous lands. And very often we neglect to consider indigenous and local people as the key stewards of peatlands around the world. So moving forward from this, we have to work, how can we empower the stewards of the land? How do we encourage them to move forward, to maintain that role? How can we better channel some of these climate resources that we're all talking about to support and empower the indigenous community who are living within these key areas? So I think we have a very limited time moving forward. We have 8 years left till 2030, that key date by which time all emissions are meant to peak and be dropping off. We're meant to have resolved all of the key issues. Are we going to get there? We must stop and re-wet and restore peatlands in that coming 8 years. By 2050, we're meant to be carbon neutral. Are we really? That means all drained agriculture on peatlands and forestry on peatlands need to change to some other practice. We need to enhance the protection of existing peat in regions where peatlands is threatened, such as in Southeast Asia, Congo, Amazon Basin, as well as in temperate and boreal regions. We need to consider peatlands in our climate adaptation strategies, such as the impact of climate change on peatlands, permafrost peatlands, coastal peatlands, and integrate peatlands as a positive measure that we can do to reduce flooding, to provide water supply and other benefits, economic benefits from peatland systems. We must find new economically viable peatland management options to come with a new dynamic and transform the way forward, and we have to mobilize resources. I think Jane mentioned it earlier in an earlier session, $300 billion is needed globally for peatland restoration and management, and we need to organize that quickly. So with that, I'd like to thank all of the speakers on the two panels, the organizations, Wetlands International, FAO, UNEP, Ramsar Convention, IFAD, GMC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Global Environment Center, for facilitating and supporting the organization of this side event. I'd like to thank the moderators, speakers, and our audience for being here today, both here in this room and online. I'd like to thank all of you here and online in advance for the work that you're going to do to take the message from this meeting back to your colleagues, back to the negotiation, back to your countries to try and move us forward. And we need to set some very clear targets, what we're going to do in the next year before we come back to the next meeting in COP28. And hopefully we have further progress as we've made in the last year. And finally, please remember to listen to the indigenous people and local communities and support their empowerment. Thank you very much. Everyone, don't leave the room. There's more work to do. There's refreshment and drinks, and you have only a few minutes to please take from that. At the back of the room, please help yourself. And the next session, I think, is going to start in another 10 minutes. So keep quietly at the back of the room if you're still consuming the resources. Thank you.